The camera strap was eating my neck. Third day in London, third day of this strap performing slow-motion decapitation against my sunburn, and I still hadn't switched to the padded one Catherine packed in my bag, the one she'd labeled in her schoolteacher handwriting, "For your neck, you absolute child." I hadn't called Catherine in 11 days. The strap felt like penance. I left it. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace that Tuesday was the usual gorgeous disaster. A wall of selfie sticks, sun hats, and middle-aged couples in matching trainers who navigated the pavement like bumper cars with fanny packs. I'd squeezed myself to a position near the sentry box on the west side, close enough to see the individual stitches on the guard's tunic. Red as a wound. The guard was Coldstream. I knew that much. 2 buttons, spaced. The regimental difference had been in the briefing packet my editor, Gavin, had emailed with the subject line, "Last chance. Don't screw this up." Gavin communicated exclusively in threats and passive-aggressive punctuation. The packet was 40 pages. I'd read 6. 6 was enough to tell me the man in the sentry box was not a statue, was not a prop, was not a tourist attraction with a heartbeat. He was a serving soldier in the British Army, trained in live combat, deployed to operational theaters I couldn't point to on a map if you gave me a laser and a prayer. The bearskin hat weighed 1.5 pounds. The tunic was wool. It was 26 degrees. He'd been standing for over 2 hours. I knew because I'd been watching, not for the article, not anymore. I was watching because something was wrong with his eyes. They were blue, pale, and the color of dishwater in morning light, and they were fixed on a point approximately 40 yards past the iron railings, past the Victoria Memorial, past the clot of Japanese students comparing lens filters, fixed on absolutely nothing, which is what they train you to do. Eyes forward, middle distance. The 1,000-yard stare of a man who has been told in very specific and non-negotiable terms that he does not get to be human for the next 2 hours. But his left hand was trembling. Not much. Not the kind of tremble you'd see from the crowd. The kind you see at 4 feet, when you've been staring too long and your own hands have nothing to do and you start noticing things that are none of your business. His left hand inside the white glove was shaking against the rifle stock with a frequency that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with something he was holding inside his chest like a swallowed grenade. I lifted my camera. Reflex, then lowered it. Some things aren't yours to take. His name was Harwick. I learned that later. Corporal James Harwick, 1st Battalion Coldstream Guards, 26 years old, from a town in Lancashire I'd never heard of and couldn't spell without autocorrect. But right then, at 2:31 p.m., he was just the guard. Capital T, capital G, a fixture, a monument to the idea that duty could live inside a body and the body could just take it. The crowd loved him for it, loved the stillness, the way he didn't blink when a pigeon landed on his hat, the way his jaw stayed locked when a kid, maybe 8, red Spider-Man shirt, and the universal uniform of chaos, darted up and waved both hands 3 inches from his face. The kid's father filmed it. Of course he did. "Go on, make him laugh." The father, American, Midwest flat, the vowels lazy and wide. He was holding his phone like a weapon, landscape mode, already framing the thumbnail. "Bet you can't make him laugh." Harwick didn't move. The kid tried a face, tongue out, eyes crossed, the full 8-year-old artillery. Nothing. The crowd loved it. Phones went up like a field of glass flowers blooming toward a digital sun. I didn't lift mine. My strap burned. My neck deserved it. Here is what I've learned in 14 years of writing about people who stand in places for money. Everyone has a line. Buskers, mimes, street performers in Times Square painted silver and pretending to be robots for tips. And everyone has a moment where the character drops and the person underneath surfaces like a body from a lake. You can see it. A flicker, a micro-expression. The mask slips, and for 1/2 second you're looking at a human being who has rent due, and a mother who calls too much, and an ex who still has their Netflix password. Harwick's mask didn't slip. It shattered. The man came from the left. I didn't see him approach. Nobody did. He materialized the way trouble always does, already too close by the time you notice. Tall. 6'2", maybe 6'3". Denim jacket over a football shirt, the kind that's been washed until the crest is a ghost. He was holding a can of something. Stella, I think. Though I've been wrong about beer brands in print before, and Gavin circled it in red like I'd committed treason. The can was half crushed. So was he. That loose-limbed, center-of-gravity gone swagger that says the afternoon started at 11 and hasn't hit bottom yet. He walked up to the sentry box the way you'd walk up to a jukebox, like Harwick was a thing that existed for his amusement, a coin-operated experience. Oi! He said it the way men like him always say it. Not a greeting, a crowbar. Harwick's eyes didn't move. Oi, mate, I'm talking to you. The crowd shifted. Phones adjusted angle. The energy changed. You could feel it. That sick little crackle that runs through a group when entertainment and danger swap seats and nobody's sure which one's driving. The man leaned in. Close. Pub breath close. What's the matter, yeah? Can't talk? They take your tongue out with the uniform? His hand came up. Not a fist. Worse. Open palm. The gesture of someone who wants to show you he's not hitting you while doing something that feels exactly like hitting you. He placed it flat on Harwick's chest. Right over the regimental buttons. Pushed, not hard. A shove you'd give a mate at a pub. A nothing shove? A what are you going to do about it shove? And Harwick rocked back on his heels. Maybe a centimeter, maybe 2, that's all. The boots too heavy and the stance too wide for more. And I watched his jaw change, not tighten, restructure. The muscles along his mandible performed some private negotiation with the bones beneath them, and the result was a jaw that no longer belonged to a ceremonial guard, but to something older and considerably less decorative. The crowd noise died. Not faded. Died. A clean cut, like someone had found the wire and snipped it. And then the man did the one thing you do not do. He reached for the hat. What happened next took 3 seconds. I've watched the footage, mine and everyone else's, and timed it with a stopwatch. 3 seconds. That's it. The length of a yawn. The space between a traffic light changing and the car behind you honking. 3 seconds that rearranged my understanding of what stillness actually is. Harwick moved. Not stepped. Not shifted. Moved. The way tectonic plates move. Inevitable. Geological. Carrying the weight of everything that had been held in place and was now, catastrophically, not. The rifle came off his shoulder in a single motion that had been drilled into his muscle memory 10,000 times on a parade ground in Catterick, and it swung to port arms, barrel up, stock down, the prescribed response to a threat within the cordon, and as the man's fingers touched the bearskin, Harwick stamped. One boot, full force. The sound cracked off the flagstones like a rifle shot, and every pigeon within 60 yards launched like they'd been spring-loaded. Stand back from the Queen's Guard. His voice. God. His voice. I'd expected volume. I got something worse. I got authority. The kind that doesn't come from the chest, but from somewhere south of the ribs, somewhere near the base of the spine, where the body stores every order it's ever followed, and every order it's ever given. It wasn't a shout. It was a detonation shaped into words. The drunk man stumbled backward. 2 steps. 3. His beer can hit the ground and rolled in a half circle like it was trying to find somewhere safe. Harwick returned to attention. The rifle on shoulder, eyes front, middle distance, 3 seconds, start to finish. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Gasps, that breathless laughter that comes when your body doesn't know whether to applaud or run. Phones waved. Someone yelled, "Get in!" with the full-throated joy of a man whose team just scored in extra time. But I wasn't watching the crowd. I was watching Harwick's left hand, still trembling. The drunk man didn't leave. That was the first problem. The second problem was that he had friends. I counted 3. They came from the direction of Green Park, moving with the coordinated non-coordination of men who'd agreed on something ugly and were pretending they hadn't. 2 wore matching jackets. Not identical, close enough. The kind of detail that means nothing until it means everything. They collected their man, hands on shoulders. Quiet words. The body language of calm down, not here, not yet. The not yet is the part that caught in my throat like a fishhook. One of them looked at Harwick, held the look for 5 seconds, 6. Then he smiled, not at Harwick, through him, the way you smile at a locked door when you already have the key. They walked away. I dropped my camera to my chest. The strap seared my sunburn, and I welcomed it. The pain a small, clean thing in a moment that had gone muddy and wrong. I looked back at Harwick. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. The trembling in his left hand had stopped. That scared me more than the smile. The afternoon should have ended there. I had enough for the piece, a color feature, 1,500 words. Gavin would have called it serviceable, which was his highest praise, delivered through teeth. I should have walked to the tube, called Catherine, eaten something that wasn't a Pret sandwich slowly developing sentience in my messenger bag. I didn't. I stayed because of the way Harwick's eyes changed at 3:15 when the relief guard didn't come. The changing of the guard, the small hourly one, not the full ceremony, runs on a schedule so precise you could calibrate surgical instruments to it. At 3:15, a replacement should have emerged from the guard room, marched to the sentry box, performed the exchange. Harwick should have been off his feet, out of the sun, drinking water from a canteen in a room with walls that didn't have tourists pressed against them. 3:15 came. No replacement. 3:20. Nothing. At 3:22, I saw Harwick's eyes break from middle distance for the first time in 3 hours. They flicked, just once, just fast, toward the guardroom door, then back. If you've never watched someone realize they've been forgotten, I don't recommend it. It's a quiet thing, smaller than you'd expect. The eyes do something the mouth doesn't, a private calculation. How long? How much longer? Can I? Then the eyes go back to nothing, and the body makes its decision for the mind, which is, I can, because I must, because the line holds or it doesn't, and I am the line. Harwick stood. The sun pressed. At 3:38, a police officer appeared at the far end of the forecourt, moving too fast, hand on his radio, the posture of a man receiving information he didn't want. He spoke to someone I couldn't see behind the guardroom wall. There was a long pause, the kind that has weight, that you can feel in your back teeth. And then 2 more officers appeared. One of them had a dog. The tourists didn't notice. The tourists were taking selfies with the sentries at the East End, 50 yards away, a whole ecosystem of flash and laughter sealed in its own bubble. I noticed. I noticed because the first officer looked at Harwick. Not past him, not through him, at him. The way you look at a load-bearing wall when someone tells you there's been an earthquake. Harwick didn't look back. His left hand had started trembling again. My phone buzzed. Gavin, where's the draft? I needed it yesterday. Yesterday, Marcus. As in the day before today. Do you need me to explain calendars? I typed back. Something's happening at the palace. 3 dots. Then, something's always happening at the palace. That's literally the point. File the guard piece. I looked at Harwick, at the officers, at the dog, now sitting. So now rigid, now pointing its muzzle toward the east wing like a compass needle finding north. I typed, no. Gavin's response was a single emoji, the skull. In Gavin's lexicon, this meant either you're dead to me or good luck. The distinction was academic. I put my phone away, tightened my camera strap. looked at the guard who was not a statue, who was trembling and still, who was standing on a line that was about to bend in a direction none of us could see yet. And I stayed. The first siren changed everything and nothing. It came from the mall, that long red tarmacked artery that runs from Trafalgar Square to the palace gates like a tongue leading to a throat, and it was the wrong kind of siren. Not the climbing wail of an ambulance, not the two-tone bark of a police car on a routine call. This was the flat. I'd sustained blare that says clear the road. Clear it now. We are not asking. I'd heard it once before, in Ankara, the week before a motorcade was hit by something that turned 3 armored vehicles into modern art. I'd filed a piece from Ankara. Gavin called it adequate. I still had metal fragments in my left calf from the experience. Some souvenirs you don't get to return. The tourists heard it too, but the way tourists hear sirens in a foreign city, as background, as atmosphere, as part of the show. A few heads turned. Most didn't. The selfie ecosystem was self-sustaining, its own closed loop of flash and validation, and a siren was just the city providing ambiance. I looked at Harwick. He'd heard it different. The change wasn't visible in his posture or his face or anything the cameras would catch. It lived in his hands, both of them. And the left had stopped trembling. The right had shifted, imperceptibly, the kind of micro-adjustment a pianist makes before the hard passage, so that his grip on the rifle was no longer ceremonial. It was operational. The difference between those two grips is the difference between a photograph and a loaded weapon. You don't see it unless you know to look. I knew to look because of Ankara, because of the metal in my calf, because some lessons get taught in shrapnel and you don't forget the coursework. At 3:44, the guardroom door opened. Not the way doors open when someone's coming to relieve a sentry. That's a measured thing, a procedure, a choreography, boots and timing. This door opened the way doors open when the conversation inside has reached a conclusion that nobody likes. A sergeant emerged. And I could tell rank by the chevrons even from my angle, 3 of them stacked on his sleeve like a warning. He was short, built like a post box someone had taught to walk, and his face carried the particular expression of a man who has just been handed a problem he didn't create and can't delegate. He walked to Harwick, stood beside him, didn't face the crowd, faced the same middle distance Harwick had been staring into for 3.5 hours. They spoke. I couldn't hear the words. From 4 feet on the other side of the railing, with crowd noise and the siren still dying in the distance, I caught fragments, shrapnel of conversation. East wing. Confirmed. A word that might have been package or might have been passage, and in the context of a palace under heightened alert, neither option was comforting. But I heard one phrase clearly because the sergeant said it while turning his head just enough for the sound to carry over the iron fence between us. "You're on the line, Harwick. No relief until stand down." Harwick's response was a single nod. The kind of nod that isn't agreement. It's acknowledgement. The body saying, yes, I know what this costs. I've already agreed to pay it. Stop telling me the price. The sergeant walked back. The door closed. Harwick stood. It was 27 degrees now. The wool tunic was designed for English autumns, not June afternoons, and I could see the sweat darkening the collar where the fabric met his neck. A creeping stain that would be invisible on camera, but from 4 feet looked like the tunic was slowly digesting him. He stood. The crowd didn't know. Wouldn't know. But was never going to know unless the line broke. And if the line broke, they would know in ways none of them had signed up for when they booked their London sightseeing package through Viator. I gripped my camera strap. Not my camera. The strap. My hands needed something to hold that wasn't a decision. The next 11 minutes were the longest short period of my life. I'm aware of how that sounds. I'm aware that 11 minutes is the length of a sitcom without commercials, the time it takes to soft-boil an egg if you like the yolk defiant, the duration of a moderately ambitious shower. 11 minutes is nothing. 11 minutes while watching a man hold a position he can't leave, wearing wool in summer, gripping a weapon that has shifted from decorative to purposeful. Now, while police officers with dogs move through the perimeter in patterns that are too structured to be routine and too fast to be drill, 11 minutes of that will rearrange your skeleton. I watched from the railings. Press pass clipped to my bag, which technically gave me no more access than any tourist, but which I kept visible the way a child keeps a nightlight on. Not because it works, but because the ritual of having it matters. The tourists thinned, not because of awareness, because of schedule. The afternoon coach groups were cycling out, replaced by evening walkers and solo travelers with guidebooks open to the wrong page. The density dropped, the sight lines opened. That's when I saw the jackets again. 3 men. Same matching, not matching denim. Standing at the Victoria Memorial, and leaning against the base with the calculated casualness of people who've chosen their position and want you to think they haven't. The drunk man wasn't with them. His slot had been filled by someone taller, leaner, with a posture that didn't belong in a tourist crowd. Too still, too balanced. The weight distributed evenly across both feet in a way that civilian bodies don't bother with because civilian bodies have never been taught that your stance is your first weapon. I had my camera up before I'd made the conscious decision to lift it. 14 years of reflex. The shutter fired and I got 3 frames, wide, medium, close on the tall man's face, before he turned his head, and I was shooting the back of a skull. 3 frames. Enough. Enough to see that his eyes were doing the same thing Harwick's were doing. Middle distance. 1,000-yard stare. The gaze of a man who has been trained to watch everything by appearing to watch nothing. My stomach performed a small but convincing audition for the role of organ that has realized something before the brain. These were not football lads. These were not drunk mates on a Tuesday bender. These were something else entirely. Wearing football lads the way Harwick wore his tunic, as uniform, as cover, as the costume that lets you stand in plain sight while being anything but plain. I lowered my camera. My hands were shaking now, not Harwick's tremor. Mine was the cheap kind, the caffeine and adrenaline cocktail that journalists develop after enough years of standing near things that are about to go wrong. I looked at Harwick. He was looking at them. Not the middle distance, not the prescribed nothing. Them. 3 men at the memorial, and Harwick's eyes were locked on the tall one with a focus that burned through the afternoon air like a laser through smoke. He'd seen what I'd seen. He'd seen it first. The next part I have to tell carefully, because I got it wrong in real time, and I need to get it right now. At 3:55, the tall man moved, not toward the palace, toward the sentry box, toward Harwick. A direct line, no hesitation, the walk of someone crossing a room to shake hands. Social, purposeful, unthreatening in every way that a trained eye recognizes as a threat. The other 2 stayed at the memorial. One had his hand in his jacket pocket. The other was on his phone. I could not tell you, under oath or otherwise, whether the phone was filming or transmitting. Both options made my teeth hurt. The tall man reached the railings. I'm 8 feet from Harwick. On my side of the fence, technically public space, technically legal, technically nothing. He stood there, and he spoke, not to the crowd, not loudly. Pitched for Harwick and anyone close enough to eavesdrop, which was me and a German couple who were arguing about whether the changing of the guard happened at 4 or 4:30 and were too absorbed in their disagreement to hear prophecy if it came with subtitles. Long day, Corporal. Harwick didn't respond. Protocol, eyes front. The training holds. Must be warm under all that. The tall man's voice was educated, not posh. The vowels were too flat, the consonants too deliberate, the accent of someone who'd grown up somewhere rougher and taught themselves something smoother. The wool, the hat, all of it. How long have you been out here? Nothing. 3 hours? 4? Does anyone bring you water? I've always wondered. Harwick's jaw did that thing again, that restructuring. The bones renegotiating with the muscles, the face becoming architecture. The tall man smiled, close-lipped, the smile of someone conducting an experiment and finding the results consistent with hypothesis. You know, he said, the thing about a sentry is that everyone assumes you can't move, can't act, can't make decisions. You're furniture, decorative, part of the building. He paused. But we both know that's not true, don't we, Corporal? He emphasized the rank, placed weight on it the way you place weight on a bruise, to see if it still hurts. We both know what you are under the wool. He held the look for 3 seconds. 4. Then he reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and the gesture of a man who knows exactly which nerves he's touching, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. White, a 4. He held it up, unfolded it without looking at it, and pressed it against the railings. From my angle, I could see writing, black ink, handwritten, neat block capitals, the kind that resist identification, the kind they teach you to use when you don't want your penmanship analyzed. I couldn't read the words. Harwick could. I know because his left hand started trembling again, not the low-frequency vibration from before. This was different. This was the tremor of a body receiving information it has been bracing for and finding that the bracing wasn't enough. Isn't ever enough. That some information arrives like a blade, and no amount of wool or discipline or 1,000-yard staring can pad the wound. The tall man folded the paper, put it back in his jacket. The whole exchange took less than 10 seconds. "See you around, Corporal," he said. He walked away, collected his friends. They moved toward the mall, 3 men in denim jackets dissolving into the tourist stream like ink into water. Harwick stood. His left hand shook. His right hand held the rifle. His eyes went back to nothing. But his breathing had changed. I could see it in the tunic. The rise and fall of his chest had shortened, quickened, the rhythm of a man running a sprint while standing absolutely still. I should have gone to the police. That's what the version of me who calls Catherine and eats proper meals and files drafts on time would have done. That Marcus would have found an officer, shown his press pass, described what he saw, handed over the camera, and let the machinery of institutional response grind into motion. I went to Harwick, not through any gate, not past any barrier. I went to the railings, the same spot the tall man had stood, and I spoke through the iron bars like a visitor at a prison that had gotten its architecture confused with a palace. I saw that. Nothing. The man with the paper. I saw his face. I have photos. 3 frames. If you need... Sir. Harwick's voice. Low. Not the parade ground detonation from earlier. The other register. The one they use when they're still in character, but the character has developed cracks, and the human is leaking through. Please step back from the guard. I'm press. I'm not a threat. I saw... Step back from the guard, sir. Listen to me. I was in Ankara in 2019. I know what a reconnaissance pass looks like. Those men were mapping your position, your response time, your... Harwick's eyes moved. Not to me. Past me. Over my shoulder toward the guard room, where the postbox sergeant had re-emerged and was walking toward us with the particular velocity of a man who has spotted a civilian talking to his sentry and views this as a personal insult to the concept of cordon integrity. Sergeant Bryce is going to ask you to leave, Harwick said, still low, still controlled. But beneath the control, something that sounded almost like gratitude, or maybe its first cousin. The recognition that someone had seen what you needed someone to see. Let him. But when he does, tell him you want to speak to the duty officer about a sentry concern. Use those words, sentry concern. He'll know what it means. I opened my mouth, closed it. Aye, and sir? What? His eyes came to me. Full contact. The middle distance collapsed, and for 1/2 second, I was looking at a 26-year-old from Lancashire who had been standing in wool for 4 hours while the temperature climbed, and his relief never came. And 3 men in denim jackets had shown him something on a piece of paper that had broken the architecture of his jaw and restarted the tremor in his hand. "Thank you for seeing." Sergeant Bryce arrived. He was everything his posture had promised. Clipped, furious, professionally outraged. I was escorted from the railings with the kind of firm courtesy the British military has perfected, the technique of making you feel both respected and removed in the same gesture. I said the words, "Sentry concern." See, Bryce's face did a thing I'd never seen a face do. It went from anger to attention without passing through any intermediate emotion, like flipping a switch that bypasses the dimmer. "Wait here," he said. He went inside. I waited. Harwick stood. The duty officer was a captain named Ilara Voss. She arrived at 4:12, which meant that whatever I'd triggered with those 2 words had moved through the chain of command at a speed that suggested the chain had already been taut. She was small, not short, compact. The kind of frame that suggests efficiency rather than limitation, every joint and angle calibrated for function, the body of someone who had learned early that taking up less space meant moving through more of it. Her hair was pulled back with the severity of someone who had decided once and permanently, and that aesthetics were a civilian luxury. Her eyes were brown and they did not blink enough. "You're the journalist." Not a question. I was holding a camera and wearing a press pass. Deduction was not required. "Marcus Webb, the Herald." "Tell me what you saw, Mr. Webb, precisely. Skip the color." Skip the color, the most British instruction I'd ever received. I told her. The 3 men, the matching jackets, the tall man's trained posture, the paper, Harwick's reaction. I told her about Ankara, about the metal in my calf, about the reconnaissance patterns that look like tourism until you know the choreography. She listened without interrupting, without nodding, without any of the conversational feedback that humans use to signal engagement. She listened the way a recording device listens, completely, impartially, at storing everything for later analysis. When I finished, she said, "Show me the photographs." I showed her. 3 frames. She looked at each for approximately 4 seconds. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Webb, what I'm going to tell you stays in this conversation, not because I'm threatening you, because if it ends up in your publication, 3 things happen. Your press credentials are revoked under the Official Secrets Advisory Framework, my career absorbs a hit it cannot afford to absorb, and a 26-year-old corporal who has done nothing wrong except stand his post gets dragged into an operational security review that will eat the next 2 years of his service record. Are we clear?" "We're clear. Those men have been flagged. Not today. Not because of you. We've been watching them for 6 weeks. What you witnessed was a contact, a deliberate approach designed to test response protocols and deliver a message to a specific individual within the guard rotation." She paused. Corporal Harwick was not a random target. The air in the guard room changed, or my lungs changed. Something between the oxygen and my blood renegotiated terms, and the result was a tightness that had nothing to do with altitude and everything to do with the fact that this story had just outgrown its container. Why him? That's the part that stays in this room, Mr. Webb. You just told me the story is bigger than a color piece about tourists and bearskin hats. You can't open a door like that and then, I can. I have. And the door is open exactly as wide as I need it to be. She looked at me with those unblinking brown eyes, and I understood something I'd spent 14 years not learning. There are people who give you information not because you've earned it, but because they need you to carry a specific weight. Not the whole truth, a piece of it. Just enough to make you invested, just enough to make you useful. Go home, Mr. Webb. File your guard piece. Make it a nice one. Harwick deserves a nice one. She walked away. The door closed. I stood in the guard room, wood-paneled, brass-fitted, smelling of boot polish and centuries of men standing still while the world pressed against them. And I understood nothing. Outside, the sun had begun its long English decline toward an evening that wouldn't fully arrive until after 9. The light had gone amber, and the crowds had thinned to stragglers and couples walking hand in hand through the kind of London evening that makes you believe the city was designed for exactly this. Golden stone, green park, the distant sound of traffic softened by trees into something almost like music. Harwick was still at his post. His relief had finally come. I could see a second guard approaching from the guard room, marching the prescribed route, performing the exchange that should have happened 90 minutes ago. The ritual was immaculate. Boot stamps, rifle presentation, the choreography of replacement, of one body telling another, I have this now, you can stop. Harwick marched away, parade ground perfect, every step measured, every angle precise. But as he passed the spot where I stood, still at the railings, I'm still holding my camera strap like a man gripping a life ring in open water, his eyes moved one more time. To me, a look that lasted less than a second. That carried more than I could name. That said, I know what you've been given, and I know it isn't enough, and I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry, and this isn't over. Then he was gone. The guardroom swallowed him. The door closed with the sound of oak meeting oak, which is the sound of a world being sealed shut. I stood there. The new guard stood there. London softened around us. A pigeon landed on the sentry box. And the evening tourists arrived with fresh phone batteries and unfired selfie sticks, and no knowledge that the man who'd stood here before them had been holding a line that had nothing to do with tourism and everything to do with a piece of paper in a stranger's jacket that I would spend the next 4 days trying to understand. I looked down at my phone. Catherine's name was on the screen. A missed call from an hour ago. I didn't call back. Not because I didn't want to. Because the version of me who would have called her back was standing in a different afternoon, in a different story, and the Marcus Webb at these railings was now carrying a weight that would change the shape of every conversation he had from this point forward. I walked toward the tube. The strap burned my neck. I let it. 4 days is not a long time. 4 days is a bank holiday weekend. 4 days is the shelf life of leftover curry. 4 days is how long it takes a bruise to go from purple to that sick yellow-green that says the body is cleaning up a mess it didn't ask for. 4 days after Buckingham Palace, I had not filed the guard piece. I had not called Catherine. I had not slept for more than 90 minutes at a stretch, which I knew because my hotel room had a clock with numbers that glowed green in the dark, and I'd developed a relationship with those numbers that could only be described as adversarial. What I had done, pulled every frame from my camera, enhanced the 3 shots of the tall man until his face was a grid of pixels that I'd stared at so long it had become abstract, a Rorschach in denim. You run his features through every public database a journalist with a lapsed premium subscription could access. Cross-reference the denim jacket brand, Stone Island, the unofficial uniform of men who want to communicate expense and threat in the same garment, against incident reports from the Metropolitan Police public log. I'd found nothing, which, in my experience, is the loudest kind of something. When you search for a person and find no record, no social media, no voter registration, no parking tickets, no trace of the digital exhaust that every living human produces just by existing in the 21st century. You haven't found an absence. You've found a perimeter. Someone has been here before you. Someone with better tools and higher clearance has scrubbed the path clean, and the cleanliness itself is the message. And the message is, stop looking. I didn't stop. On the morning of the 5th day, I went back to the palace, not to the railings, not to the tourist zone. I went to the Wellington Barracks, which sits 200 yards south of the palace on Birdcage Walk, and serves as the operational home for whichever guards regiment is on public duty rotation. The building is Victorian, red brick, functional in the way that military architecture is always functional. Beauty being a civilian indulgence, the Army tolerates only when it's been dead long enough to become heritage. I'd called ahead. Press request. Feature piece on the daily life of a serving guard. The human interest angle. Not the what it's really like package that editors love, because it flatters the reader into believing they're getting access when they're getting the curated version of access that the military has pre-approved. The public affairs officer was a lieutenant named Henley, who looked like he'd been assembled from a kit labeled exactly what you expect. Pressed, polished, smile calibrated to the millimeter. He met me at the gate with a handshake that communicated welcome and boundary in equal measure. Mr. Webb, we're pleased to support the peace. I've arranged a tour of the guard room, a brief interview with a serving corporal, and a photo opportunity during the mounting of the guard at 11 o'clock. All on the record unless specifically noted. Which corporal? Henley's smile didn't waver, but something behind it rearranged. Then the way furniture rearranges in a room where someone has been searching for something and put everything back not quite right. Corporal Davies, he's been selected for his... I'd like to speak with Corporal Harwick. The smile held. The eyes didn't. Corporal Harwick isn't available for press engagement at this time. Is he on duty? He's not available for press engagement at this time, Mr. Webb. Repetition. The military's favorite tool for closing a conversation without appearing to close it. Say the same thing twice and the shape of the words becomes a wall. Is he on base? I'm not able to discuss individual personnel schedules. Corporal Davies, Lieutenant. 5 days ago, I stood 4 feet from Corporal Harwick while 3 unidentified men conducted what Captain Voss herself described as a deliberate contact. I have photographs. I have a conversation with your duty officer on record. I'm not here for a feature on boot polish and parade drills. I'm here because something happened to one of your men, and the institutional response has been to make him unavailable, which in my experience means either he's been protected or he's been silenced, and the difference between those two things matters. Henley's smile departed. What replaced it was better. Honest. The face of a man who has been given a script and just watched someone set fire to it. Wait here, Mr. Webb. He went inside. I waited in the courtyard. The barracks smelled of brass cleaner and overcooked vegetables, the twin aromas of every military installation I'd ever visited, as if the Army had signed a global contract with both. He came back with someone who was not Corporal Davies. The Harwick looked different out of the tunic, not smaller. That's the cliché. The man behind the uniform is always smaller, diminished, revealed as ordinary by the absence of ceremonial wool. Harwick wasn't smaller. He was specific. In uniform, he'd been an archetype, a symbol. The Guard, capital T, capital G. In a gray Army-issue t-shirt and fatigue trousers, he was a person, 26 years old. Shoulders that carried muscle the way some men carry tension, functionally, without vanity. A scar on his left forearm, 3 inches long, healed white, the kind that comes from something that moved fast and bit deep. Lancashire in his jaw. Lancashire in the way he held his hands. Open, not fisted. The hands of a man from a place where fists were common, and the choice not to make them was a statement. You came back, he said. That we were in a side room off the main corridor. Henley had arranged it, or been told to arrange it. The distinction was above my access level. The room had 2 chairs, a desk, and a window that looked onto a drill square where a platoon was practicing formation under the supervision of a sergeant who communicated exclusively through volume and disappointment. I came back. Captain Voss said you would. He sat. Not military straight, tired straight, the posture of a body that has been held rigid for so long that even its relaxation is structured. She said you had the look. What look? The one journalists get when they've been given half a story, like a dog with half a bone, can't eat it, can't bury it, Can't stop carrying it around." He almost smiled. Not quite. The muscles attempted it, and the result was something closer to a wince that had gotten lost on the way to humor. "Half a bone is generous," I said. "I've got fragments. 3 photographs of a man who doesn't exist in any database I can access. A captain who told me just enough to keep me awake for 4 nights. And a 26-year-old corporal who looked at me through a set of iron railings and thanked me for seeing." I did. "What did I see, Harwick?" He looked at the window, the drill square, the platoon moving in unison, boots striking concrete in a rhythm that was older than any of the bodies producing it. "Do you know what the paper said?" "No." It said, "We know about your sister." He told me in pieces. Not because he was being careful. Though he was, the words chosen and placed the way a sapper places feet in a minefield. And he told me in pieces because that's how the story existed inside him, not a narrative, a collection of shrapnel, fragments that had lodged in different parts of his life and never been removed, only accommodated, worked around, built over. His sister, Megan, was 23. She was a signals analyst, not Army, Civil Service, Ministry of Defense, one of the invisible people who sit in buildings with no signs and process information that moves through channels the public doesn't know exist. She was good at it. Harwick said this with the particular pride of a brother who doesn't fully understand what his sister does, but knows she does it better than anyone else and has decided this is enough. 6 months ago, Megan had flagged something. Harwick didn't know the details, couldn't know, had the classification walls between military and civilian intelligence being designed precisely to prevent family conversations from becoming security breaches. What he knew was what Megan told him on the phone the night she flagged it, her voice carrying the specific frequency of someone who has found something that scared them and needs to say it out loud to make it real. She said, "Jamie, I found something wrong, and I told someone, and now I'm not sure I told the right someone." That was it. 1 sentence. He'd replayed it so many times it had worn smooth, the words losing their texture the way a stone loses its edges in a river. Still the same shape, but the sharpness gone, replaced by something that fit too easily in the hand. 3 weeks after that phone call, Megan was reassigned. New building, new access level, new phone number. Yet she could still call home, still talk to their mom in Lancashire, still exist as a person in the ordinary sense. But the Megan who called Jamie in the night to say she'd found something wrong, that Megan had been moved behind a wall he couldn't see over. He'd tried. Filed requests through his chain of command. Called the MOD personnel office, which was an experience he described with the dry disgust of a man who has discovered that bureaucracy is not incompetence, but architecture. Every delay designed, every transfer planned, every "your call is important to us." A load-bearing wall in a structure built to hold nothing and no one accountable. He'd gotten nowhere, which, like my search results, was somewhere very specific. And then Tuesday happened. 3 men. A piece of paper, and 5 words that cracked the 1,000-yard stare and put a tremor in the hand that held the rifle. "We know about your sister." "Why you?" I asked. "Why approach you on the line? You're a ceremonial guard, sentry duty. You're the most visible, most recorded, most surveilled soldier in the British Army. Every tourist with a phone is a witness. Why would anyone make contact in the most exposed position possible?" Harwick looked at me. The look carried something I'd been misreading since Tuesday. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't fear. It was the specific expression of a man who has been asking himself the same question and arrived at an answer he can't say out loud because saying it would make it real, and real is a country he's not ready to emigrate to. "Because that's the point," he said. "What is?" "Being visible. Being recorded. Being watched by 200 cameras." He leaned forward. His hands were on his knees, open, still choosing not to be fists. "If something happens to a guard on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, the whole world sees it. every phone, every CCTV camera, every tourist who posts it to Instagram before the police even arrive. It's the most documented 50 square meters on Earth. So they approached you there because they wanted it seen. They wanted a record. Not of what they said, no cameras close enough to catch that. A record that they were there, that they got close, that the line between them and the palace is thinner than anyone wants to believe. He sat back. The chair creaked. The drill square outside had gone quiet. The platoon dismissed. Went the sergeant's voice replaced by the mundane sounds of an army base at midday. Doors, boots, the distant industrial complaint of a kitchen preparing lunch for 400. They weren't threatening me, Webb. They were using me, my position, my visibility. The fact that I can't move, can't respond, can't break character without it becoming an incident. They used the protocol against itself. Showed up, proved access, delivered a message they knew I couldn't react to. Not publicly, not without blowing everything open. And then they walked away and the crowd went back to taking selfies and the whole thing looked like, what? A tourist encounter. A bloke chatting up a guard. Nothing. His hand was trembling again. Left hand. The one that told the truth his face wouldn't. But it wasn't nothing. No. And your sister? He looked at the drill square. Empty now. The concrete blank and clean and holding nothing but the memory of boots. Megan called me last night. New number. Couldn't talk long. Said she was fine, said not to worry, said all the things people say when they're managing your feelings because they can't manage their own. He paused. She said one other thing. She said, they moved me again. New building. No windows this time. No windows. I sat with that. The weight of it. A signals analyst who found something wrong and reported it to the wrong someone and has been moved twice in 6 months, each time deeper, each time less visible. And the latest room has no windows. Harwick sat with it too. Had been sitting with it for days, inside wool, inside discipline, and inside a protocol that demanded his body remain a monument while his sister disappeared inch by inch into buildings with fewer and fewer windows. I asked the question I'd come to ask. What do you want me to do? He looked at me, a long look, the kind that takes inventory, not of your credentials or your publication or your camera, but of something less quantifiable. Whether you're the kind of person who carries a thing all the way or puts it down when it gets heavy. Captain Voss told you to file a nice piece, a color feature, the human behind the bearskin. She did. She told you Harwick deserves a nice one? She did. I need you to do both. I didn't understand. I said so. Write the feature, the one Gavin wants. The tourist encounter, the drunk, the boot stamp, the crowd reaction. Write it human, write it true. The guard who moved and the crowd who cheered and the moment everyone forgot that the man inside the uniform had a name and a family and a left hand that wouldn't stop shaking. He stood, walked to the window, placed one hand on the glass, fingers spread, and I thought of his sister in a room without windows, and the echo made my chest do something I couldn't name. And somewhere in that piece, buried, not flagged, not headlined, I need you to mention 3 men in denim jackets at the Victoria Memorial, matching not matching, one with a trained posture. I need that detail in print, attributed to an anonymous witness, not me, not you by name, just observed, documented, on the record in a way that can't be scrubbed because it's not intelligence, it's not classified. It's a journalist's observation in a published feature. You want a breadcrumb. I want a nail. Something small and sharp that someone can step on later when they're walking through the official version and something doesn't feel right. A detail that doesn't fit. A loose thread in the nice story. And when they pull it, he stopped, turned from the window. His face was doing something complicated. Not the jaw restructuring from Tuesday, not the almost smile from 10 minutes ago. Something new. The expression of a man placing a bet on a stranger with a camera strap burn and a half-eaten Pret sandwich decomposing in a bag and a girlfriend he hasn't called in 2 weeks. When they pull it, maybe they find Megan. I left the barracks at 1:15. The London was performing its early afternoon routine. Buses and black cabs and tourists navigating the pavement with the spatial awareness of concussed geese. The sun was out. The palace gleamed. A new guard stood at the sentry box, immaculate, invisible behind the uniform, another body holding the line that runs through the center of British ceremony like a spine through a body. I walked to St. James's Park, found a bench, sat down. The lake was busy with pelicans. I'd read somewhere that pelicans had been in the park since the 1660s, a gift from a Russian ambassador to Charles II. 360 years of pelicans, eating fish and ignoring the monarchy and being, in their weird-beaked, improbable way, the most honest residents of Westminster. They served no one. They represented nothing. They simply were. And I envied them with an intensity that felt medically inadvisable. My phone sat in my hand. Gavin's last message was still on the screen. The skull emoji, the one that meant either death or good luck, the ambiguity now feeling less like Gavin's sardonic humor and more like an accurate assessment of the situation. I had a story. Not the one I'd come for. Not the 1,500-word color feature on guards and tourists and the comedic collision of ceremony and selfie culture. I had something else. Something with roots that went down into places I couldn't see, and branches that reached toward people I hadn't met, and a trunk that was a 26-year-old man in a gray t-shirt with a scar on his arm, and a sister in a room with no windows. I could file the nice piece, give Gavin his serviceable feature. I mentioned the 3 men in a single sentence, buried in paragraph 9, attributed to an observer near the railings. A nail, small and sharp, and then walk away and let the nail sit in the published record like a splinter in a floorboard, waiting for the right foot. Or I could file nothing, keep digging, pull the thread myself, follow the breadcrumb trail from the Victoria Memorial to wherever it led, through whatever databases and classified perimeters and rooms with fewer and fewer windows awaited at the end of it. Option 1 was safe, professional, the act of a journalist who understands his lane and stays in it. Option 2 was Ankara. I touched my left calf, the metal under the skin, the fragment that airport security flags every time, the souvenir from the last time I'd decided that a story was worth more than a lane. Now, Catherine had been there for Ankara, had held the compress against my leg in the hotel room because I'd refused the hospital, refused the questions, refused anything that would slow down the filing of a piece that Gavin ultimately called adequate and buried on page 11. Catherine wasn't here now, hadn't been here for the conversation I'd just had, didn't know about Harwick or Megan or the 3 men or the paper or the windowless room. And if I chose option 2, she wouldn't be here for whatever came next, because whatever came next was the kind of thing that ate the people near the person doing it, consumed the bystanders, turned every phone call into a risk assessment and every silence into a gap that fear fills. I'd already lost her once by choosing a story. I could feel the second loss loading, chambered and waiting. The pelicans didn't care. One of them caught a fish and threw its head back, and the fish disappeared into a throat designed for exactly this purpose, and the pelican looked at me with an expression that communicated, more clearly than any human face could, the total indifference of a creature whose priorities have never been confused. I opened my phone. Not to Gavin, not to Catherine. I opened the camera roll, found the 3 frames, the tall man's face, pixels and denim, and an expression that said I have a key. I stared at it. Then I opened a new document. Blank page, cursor blinking. I typed, he thought the guard was just a statue, deleted it. Typed, Corporal James Harwick, 1st Battalion Coldstream Guards, stood at his post on the west sentry box of Buckingham Palace for 4 hours and 11 minutes on a Tuesday in June. And during that time, approximately 200 tourists photographed him. One man shoved him. 3 men studied him. And one journalist, me, watched a piece of paper turn a statue back into a human being. I looked at it. Paragraph 1. On the record. Then I scrolled to paragraph 9. Left it blank. A space waiting for a nail. I saved the document. Put my phone down. Looked at the lake. A pelican regarded me from the water. Its pouch hung beneath its beak like a collapsed parachute. It had absolutely no opinion about the Official Secrets Act, operational security perimeters, or the ethical obligations of embedded journalism. It was a pelican. It was perfect. My phone buzzed. Not Gavin. An unknown number. London prefix. I answered. Mr. Webb. A woman's voice. Not Voss. Younger. The vowels crisp and unplaceable. No region, no class. A no fingerprint. The voice of someone who has been trained to sound like nobody. Captain Voss gave me your number. She said you'd be expecting my call. I hadn't been. Voss had given me nothing that suggested a follow-up. But the sentence was constructed to make me feel like I'd been brought into a circle rather than placed in front of a door, and I recognized the technique because I'd used it myself in interviews. Make the subject feel chosen, not targeted. I'm listening. Corporal Harwick spoke to you this morning about his sister. A statement, not a question. Yes. Then you know more than you should and less than you need. There's a middle ground. I'd like to help you find it. Who are you? A pause. And the kind that isn't hesitation but selection. The speaker choosing from multiple available truths and picking the one with the right weight. Someone who works in a building with no windows. The line went dead. I sat on the bench. The pelican caught another fish. London moved around me with the cheerful indifference of a city that has survived plagues and fires and bombings and has learned over 1,000 years that the most dangerous things happen in the quietest rooms. I looked at my phone. The call log showed the number. I saved it. Then I called Catherine. For the first time in 16 days, it rang twice. Marcus. Katie. A silence. Not empty. Full. I loaded with everything we hadn't said, and everything we were about to say, and the specific weight of a name spoken by someone who has been waiting to hear it, and has stopped expecting to. I'm in London, I said. I found a story. You always find a story. This one found me. Another silence. I could hear her breathing, could hear beneath the breathing the classroom sounds, chairs, voices, the background hum of a life that continued whether or not I participated in it. Is it going to be like Ankara? I touched my calf. The metal sang under my fingertip, a frequency only I could hear. I don't know. Marcus. I know. Do you? The pelican had moved on. The bench was just a bench. The palace glinted in the distance, white and gold and immaculate, holding its secrets the way it had always held them, behind ceremony, behind wool, behind the 1,000-yard stares of men who had been told to stand still while the world arranged itself around them. I'll call you tonight, I said. I promise. You promised last time. I know. She hung up. Or I did. The distinction had stopped mattering somewhere around the 4th silence. I put the phone down, picked up the camera, looked at the palace through the viewfinder. The new guard stood at the sentry box, motionless. Perfect. A statue that breathed and bled and had a name no one in the crowd would ever ask for. I took one frame, wide, the whole forecourt, the railings, the tourists, the guard, the palace behind him, the entire architecture of visible power and invisible service compressed into a single image that Gavin would use as the header and readers would scroll past in 2 seconds on their way to something louder. And somewhere inside that palace, or behind it, or in a building nearby that had no sign and no windows, a thread was waiting to be pulled. I lowered the camera, Stood up, walked toward the tube. The strap burned. I left it. It was starting to feel like the only honest thing I owned. End of Part 3. Corporal Harwick returned to sentry duty the following Thursday. He served the remainder of his rotation without incident. The feature was published 11 days later in the Herald. Paragraph 9 contained a single sentence about 3 men in matching jackets observed near the Victoria Memorial. It was not edited. It was not flagged. It sat in the text the way a nail sits in a floorboard, flat, small, and sharp enough to find the right foot. The unknown number never called again, and Megan Harwick's Ministry of Defense personnel file was updated 6 weeks after publication. The update was classified. Marcus Webb did not return to Ankara. He went somewhere else. The metal in his calf set off the airport scanner both ways. He left the camera strap on.